hoy triste tus funerales y alegre tu alegría, combatiendo al oligarca.
Okay.
Action.
Okay, I thought that first we might start by asking you two to just talk a little bit about your own past and how your evolution as Puerto Rican political women has been. And where did this all start for you?
Okay. You want me to begin?
Sure. Why don't you start?
Well, to become a political person, a Puerto Rican revolutionary woman, is not something that happens from one day to another. It's a process, like all revolutionary politics. I see myself as a only child raised in East Harlem, New York City, by two Puerto Rican parents, working class people. I had advantages, yes, because I was an only child. And that in itself provided me to be able to have a little more than most of the kids in my neighborhood didn't have. But within that realm, my parents were able to maintain within me a certain essence of who I was. An example of that is I went to private schools, and I faced a lot of racism in the Catholic school system. But more than that, I was involved in show business, and that in itself was an exposure for me because I began to see different elements of society. I wasn't aware of it then. Now that I'm older, I can reflect back and see how my parents' influence in me gave me the essence of that I am a Puerto Rican living in a society that is very racist.
Were your parents at all political themselves? What was their approach to being
Basically, my father came to this country at 17, and at that time he had been involved in the Puerto Rican nationalist movement. My mother was born and raised in New York City. But they had a sense of not political revolutionary, but a sense of community concern, so that they were very much involved in the community. So that in itself sort of gave me a responsibility. I mean, we had a choice to move out, and we chose not to, because my parents always felt that we had something to contribute to that community itself. As I grew older, and I lost them at a very early age, my father at 15, my mother at 20, I also knew that I had to get an education, number one, if I was just going to survive. And then I decided that I wanted to contribute and work in the community. So I did that by working as a community organizer. And I thought there was the advent of the anti-poverty programs, and I thought that that was going to be the answer. And it all sounded very beautiful. Maximum feasible participation of the poor. Well, this is it. Here we're going to bring about some change. And I learned early on, by the time I was 20, that that wasn't the answer, because the programs in itself were not creating self-sufficiency. They were creating people became dependent on a system that wasn't doing anything for them. Then in that realm, I got involved in politics, electoral politics, and I thought, well, maybe if we had more Puerto Ricans in elected official positions, that would change. I found that to be a fallacy. Then I had to make a determination, what was I going to do with my life professionally to earn a living? And I thought, well, television was going to be the answer. I could create positive images of our people. Well, I shortly learned that that in itself, media, all aspects of our society are controlled by one system. In that process, though, I feel that I've contributed to a certain extent, given the limitations of media, given the limitations of who we are working in that kind of a realm.
What was the particular content of the shows you did? I mean, you're saying it was related to your politics. What does that mean?
To a certain extent. Basically, what I was involved in was children's programming. I did a TV series for children called Infinity Factory. And I worked on the first Latino TV series called Realidades, which was short-lived, simply because it was there that we decided we were going to do documentaries on the reality of the Puerto Rican people, the plight of the Puerto Rican. And we lasted a year, to be honest. We did get a grant to go national, and that in itself lasted 6 months. Yet I continued to work in the medium because I needed to make a living, number one, and two, I felt that I could contribute something, if nothing else, to put out some positive images of our people and to be able to interject the reality of the plight of the Puerto Rican people. And I seem to be reverting back to that plight, and that basically is the colonial status of Puerto Rico. That is why my parents came to this country.
When you use the term colonial status of Puerto Rico, what do you mean it by that?
What we mean, what we say is the reality. Puerto Rico is a colony of this country. The United States would never cede to that, but according to the United Nations and international law, any country that is subjugated by another country, and Puerto Rico rightfully is, the United States controls us, our economy, our education. They have attempted continuously to take away our culture, but they have not been successful in that aspect. But all the means of socialization for the Puerto Rican people are controlled by the United States government to such an extent that such a small island has become their military bastion. There are 11 military bases on the island of Puerto Rico today. Because of that economic relationship is why today we find we are a split nation. 6 million Puerto Ricans, 3 million in the United States, and 3 million estimating on the island. So that what we find is, I am here in the United States, and I don't think there's a Puerto Rican alive who wants to come to this country. It is the economic situation that they think that coming here is going to provide a better life, and we find the reality is they face the same oppression that they faced on the island. So that my parents are that, and I am of that generation, which in some sociological terms is defined as the bridge generation. But that doesn't make me any less Puerto Rican. I mean, I was raised in New York City and born in New York City, and I think that there are some differences. Carmen, on the other hand, was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I think that in itself creates a different sort of, what do you think, Carmen?
Yes, I think that as you talk to each and everyone, you will get to see that we represent a broad sector of the Puerto Rican nation. I was born in Puerto Rico, and I was brought to the United States by my parents, who were forced to migrate as a consequence of the, to survive, basically, because most Puerto Ricans who migrated to this country, specifically the ones that were farm workers, had to do this during a period of transition that Puerto Rico went through in the late 1940s. So when we reached this country, we came from a rural environment to a city, an inner city, most of us, which was overcrowded and which had deplorable conditions.
Was that New York or Chicago?
No, I came to Chicago. My family settled in Chicago.
I know your situation about how you grew up and came to consciousness as a young Puerto Rican woman is a little different from Dylcia's because you were born on the island. Can you tell us about how things started off for you?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so are we ready right now on that? Okay. My early life is no different than that of, thousands of Puerto Ricans who were forced to migrate to the United States. This migratory period, which started around the late 40s, when agriculture, which was the base of Puerto Rican economy, was abandoned and light industry introduced by the United States. To alleviate all of the plight of unemployment, about 32,000 Puerto Ricans were forced to leave the island. It was around this time also that the United States government moved in and acquired most of the arable land of the Puerto Rican people so they could settle in with military bases. The types of experiences that I encountered as a young adult were deplorable, as are still for most Puerto Ricans in this country, because I would say this was like 35 years, maybe 30 years back that we came to this country. And the conditions at this time have not improved any for the Puerto Rican people. I just read some statistics that show that 41.9% of the Puerto Rican people live the poorest among the poor still at this time, compared to 11.6% of the people, the American public in this country. So that shows that most of the people who had to emigrate to this country have not gone anywhere. There's no kind of mobility, there's no kind of improvement in terms of the conditions that the Puerto Rican people are facing in this country. This also ties in with the kind of situation that we have in our country. There is a crisis in Puerto Rico, which reflects the type of sub-living conditions that the Puerto Ricans are living in this country. We have also like 21.8% unemployment, 71% of the people who have no way of, no income, so they have to depend on the United States government. Okay, from from deplorable conditions which poverty bring about, I ascended and I decided that I would have to do something with my life so that I could then help other people. So my first thought was to go to school and get an education, which I did. I could have finished my PhD had I not been captured. I was almost finished with it. After I finished my education, my first and most desired thing was to go back to my people and to assist them. I became a high school teacher in a predominantly Puerto Rican high school, Tully Clemente in Chicago. There, I worked hand in hand with the community in attempting to change the types of conditions that the students were facing, because we have a tremendous dropout rate in that school. 72.9% of the students drop out. So I thought that it had a relationship to the kinds of teaching or the kinds of programs, curriculums that the school had. So the first thing I decided was to get the parents involved and to attempt to change curriculum, change teachers, change principals, So we got involved in that kind of activity, which was at that time very important because we initiated a process of activism that was very necessary in a community. So from there, I became actively involved in many other types of community development projects, such as health services, anti-police brutality groups, drug rehabilitative programs, and we spend lots of our energy just trying to shape up the community in that sense.
What made a change for you then between this sort of community mobilizing around precise local issues to becoming directly an activist for the independence of Puerto Rico? Was there some sort of incident or?
I think most of us evolve gradually. It is necessary for people to go through a process of activism. I guess you can call those years your formative years, your political developmental years. And it is a process of, first, I believe, education. You have to look, and when I say education, I mean trying to learn from the people and trying to analyze the types of conditions. And then you just acquire a desire for seeking for causes, deeper, the roots of problems. Mm-hmm. So then as you become involved and as you get involved and try to reform and change different things, you acquire that type of consciousness. And it's a consciousness of poverty and its consequences. It's a consciousness of oppression. And when you reach and combine both, the consciousness that poverty and oppression are not the natural order of a society, then that is like a step towards a revolutionary development.
Were there other, for both of you at this point, were there other people's struggles around the world that inspired you or influenced you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, my experience being raised in New York, in the early 60s, we have the whole anti-war movement. For me, particularly, was the black movement, the whole civil rights movement, which in itself sort of, we saw the emergence of the Black Panther Party in New York City. With that, the emergence of the Young Lords Party, which for the first time you began to hear Puerto Rican people in New York saying, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm proud, I have a community and I'm gonna demand certain rights for myself. Again, the Young Lords Party, the Black Panther Party suffered tremendously, because of course once the government saw that people's awareness and level of consciousness was being risen, then the repression came. So people were arrested. As we well know, the Black Panther Party was infiltrated. The Young Lords Party totally dissolved. People are doing other things now. We don't know where everybody is, but that in itself served for myself as a stimulant to, we were involved in the community, but a different perspective became a reality. And then I went to college, later on. So then it was the whole student movement, where Puerto Rican students, we began to see Puerto Rican Studies Department and student rights and student demands. And that in itself, in 1969, we had a tremendous, I went to Brooklyn College where the entire campus was surrounded by police and the FBI walked in and people were indicted. So it wasn't just a little student movement, there was consequences that people were being involved in. At the same token, I was still involved in the community. And I think Carmen experiences the same, even though she's in Chicago. I think that phenomena.
How was that
Yes.
for you?
See, what it all starts out as is like a reaffirmation. It's an affirmation of Puerto Ricanism, you can say. It's an affirmation of nationality. But then the beauty of it is that it develops into a more sophisticated type of struggle. Because as you see people demanding their rights and involved in different types of struggle, you see that they have a tremendous potential, and
change.
And you have awakened something in them, which you all of a sudden realize that there is that potential in every human to want change, to demand change. So then, as you see this, and basically how we all, most of us came to realize this was when we saw that we were demanding small, minor changes, small reforms within a system, and they were totally ignored. And at the same time, we saw tremendous amounts of fear in the system's representatives. So it gave us a sense of curiosity at the same time. Why are these small demands such a threatening type of, of things? So then we started to investigate, and we started to realize that yes, that's the basic steps of revolutionaries. They have to demand, and they have to get other people to demand, and from there, eventually, massive types of demands will evolve, and you will have some kind of significant change,
I think also you see around the world, in third world countries, you see the Vietnam people, how it is through armed struggle. And if we look at history, people do not gain national liberation struggles and never won by sitting and demanding and sit-ins. Unfortunately, there is the question of armed violence. None of us, we're not advocates. We advocate, yes, revolutionary, what we define as revolutionary violence or revolutionary needs, and that is utilization of arms, because this country doesn't respect anything else.
What then would be the difference between what you're calling revolutionary violence and the violence that you're saying is inherent in the United States against the Puerto Rican people? If you could maybe flesh that out a little more, because I think that's a point that a lot of people, that whole issue, and also if you're talking about armed struggle, if you're talking about revolutionary violence, if you could define those more, and then you're declaring yourselves prisoners of war. What does that mean? A lot of people,
If you study the history, see, if you take this, the struggle or the actions that we have undertaken as isolated acts, they will look like acts of insanity, perhaps, to some people. But our acts are interrelated to a whole struggle that has been going on for many years, and that struggle is for the independence of a country. And that struggle stems out of conditions that are deplorable, both for our people in Puerto Rico and for the people in the United States. So then you do have to take everything in a complete form. Otherwise, we will look like it is a violent type of act that we are engaged in, and we are not. This is justifiable because we are people with the right to have a sovereign nation, you know. And if we do not respond with this type of response, we will then permit our country to be used for acts of destruction, our people to be used as cannon fodder, the way this young man that was recently shot down, his name is Captain Fernando Dominici Rivas or something like that. And he was the captain that was shot down while serving a military mission for the United States in the sovereign nation of Libya. You know, we cannot, our nation, there's a disgrace to our nation, a disgrace to the Puerto Rican people that we permit that type of thing. You know, that is a lack of, obviously, direction, because when we have people serving the interests of this country in that form, we know definitely that they are not directed or their energies are not channeled in the right direction.
I think just another point. When we talk about armed struggle, we have to look at the history of the independence movement in Puerto Rico. Didn't begin with the capture of 11 Puerto Rican prisoners of war. It has a history from the moment that the United States invaded Puerto Rico 86 or 87 years ago. There has always been armed insurrection. What we are, the FALN and all the other clandestine organizations today that operate both in the United States and in Puerto Rico, we are a trajectory of examples that are set before us. We have learned from history. The Nationalist Party was involved in armed attacks. They believed in a frontal attack of the United States government. Well, we learned from looking at other liberation struggles that when you're within the belly of the beast, it's not possible to do frontal attacks. So we developed a clandestine approach. An approach, you know, they are targets that have happened in the history of liberation process. The war is not, or the actions are not against the American people. The actions are against all those multinational corporations that are part and parcel of the destruction of our country. Because as we well know, it is their right, it is their interest that has exploited our people, that they can sit and set up their corporations and destroy our land, destroy our environment, destroy our people, because our people are never trained for the jobs that they offer, and then there's no intention for them to have that. So that in essence, they're reaping the benefits of the labor of our people, the destruction of our country, and no one is doing anything to them. There is violence. This country daily has acts of violence against our people. Every Puerto Rican child that gets on drugs is a violent act against our people, be it on the island or in the United States. In the island of Vieques, which the United States has chosen to make it into its naval operational base, thousands of Puerto Rican children have been blown up because of live mines that are there.
While we're on the subject of violence, I would like to say that Fanon, the one that wrote The Wretched of the Earth, he uses an example, and I often think about it. It's that when a group of people or when a person is ruled by violence, it often, after many years of absorption of this type of treatment, that person will then revert and use that absorbed violence against the person, the colonizer in our case, or those that are oppressing us. So I believe that, yes, it happens. There is a process that we go through, and we have been, most of us, mistreated, both in our country and in this country. So after a period of years, there is something within us, which is another thing. I think within every colonized person, there is a feeling of destruction, because
Wanting to strike back.
there is that feeling that we will, within us is that the solution. Within us is that type of desire to shake off that which is holding us down and which is destroying us.
Okay. And we've, I knew it was
Well,
going to be
we
short.
can explain, we can say the intro to the POW, we can do that as we said earlier over the phone. So that's all detail. I think, there's one aspect that we haven't dealt with that, we're not exceptional people. We're mothers. We're women of conscience who have made a decision in life to fight for a new life for our kids, and I think that's important. So why don't we go into that?
Well, you just said it. We were rolling, right? Okay.
We were?
Do you want to talk more about that? That was beautiful. See, sometimes the first time out is the best.
Smooth.
I think it's important that people do not see us as these rigid, hardcore people. We're human. We're mothers. Carmen has a son. I have a son. And the beauty of our commitment to struggle is because we want a future for our kids. We want our children to live a better life, not to be dehumanized, and to have a different outlook of what life can really be about.
Your son, Antonio, considers, I know there's some where you share him in a way where, can you talk about that a bit? I mean, because that sounds sort of interesting, thinking here are two women in prison, but they have a son on the outside.
Well, because we have been lucky to have been incarcerated in the same prison for so many years, 6 years now, with the exception of a short period that Dylcia had gone traveling. She was transferred to another institution. We developed, a sense of, real closeness, first among each other, and then, of course, it just happened naturally with Antonio and her. And I think I have a great belief that children are biologically ours, but not necessarily our possession. They are the children of humanity, and that's why I feel very confident in leaving Antonio to my comrades outside, because I know that they have the same belief and that he's well taken care of and loved, and he's not lacking anything. And he's just a wonderful young man and a great example to youth of his age. He's 16 years old and just a great joy to us, and very politically active and growing the way we want him to grow.
On the other hand, I think, I can't see my son. My son is underground. He'll be 7 years old, but I have the joy of having Antonio. And Carmen here, we share him. And that's a privilege, and that comes from struggle. People don't do that normally. We have chosen, and few mothers do that, but they should.
Yes.
Because as she said, our children, yes, they come from us. But if all we can give them is we guide them. We don't train our kids either. We don't have terrorist camps for them, as the enemy may well think. We teach our children who their enemy is. And as long as they know that, they can move forward.
And while we're on this topic, I would like to mention that our children are also growing. Well, some of us who have the opportunity to have our children in the open are growing very proud of us because they see that the Puerto Rican nation is acclaiming us as patriots. As a matter of fact, they just had a poll taken in Puerto Rico, and 55% of the people say that we are patriots.
Yes.
So I think it's a form of, pride also for the people in general, for our children, for everybody concerned. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ay, hijo de perra,